Through the course Brain-Based Teaching and Learning, I have had many aha moments. I've discovered many ways to improve my teaching while also dusting off some old teaching habits. I'm excited to take all that I have learned back to my classroom. While approaching this final project, I began looking at this course as a whole and thinking about what the most important things are that I learned to be able to implement in my career as an educator to make my teaching the best it can be. The first topic that Sousa covered that grabbed my attention was the use of novelty in the classroom. Sousa states that part of our survival and success as a species can be attributed to the brain's persistent interest in novelty, that is, changes occurring in the environment. The brain of our learners has changed due to frequent technology use. Today's learners are in need of lessons that keep them engaged and focused. I incorporate novelty in my classroom due to how vital it is to the learning process. A few ways that I use novelty in my classroom is the use of movement and flexible seating in my classroom. I have some tables that are lower to the floor for students to sit on with cushions. I have standing tables and regular desks for students that like a more controlled atmosphere to learn. In my classroom, we use devices in almost every subject. Oftentimes, I even use it for assessment with paper slides just like these of the students showing me what they have become experts at. We often use little songs to remember things like the water cycle. I have found these forms of novelty to be successful in keeping my class of third grade learners engaged. Another concept that served as a great reminder to me from Sousa was the importance of classroom climate. In the craziness of day-to-day lesson planning and trying to cram all the curriculum in for the year, it can often be forgotten that students come to school with a lot on their minds, or may have had bad experiences with prior school subjects that can affect their ability to have an open mind about current curriculum. Sousa stated that emotions often take precedence during cerebral processing and can impede or assist cognitive learning. I have always made sure that in my classroom, the students can feel safe to be themselves and take risks. Every day, we have a morning meeting and discuss highs and lows that we have going on inside or outside of school as a way to check in with my students on a regular basis. I also have a mailbox in my classroom for students to leave me notes anonymously if they would like, or if they just want to talk. It was a much needed reminder that students' emotions can affect their cognitive learning. We will continue to focus on having a growth mindset in my classroom and getting ourselves excited about learning new topics before diving into the curriculum. When it comes to lesson planning and I've discovered how I am going to grab my students' attention and interest on the topic, I then focus on how to appropriately use the primacy-recency effect. In a learning episode, we tend to remember best that which comes first and remember second best that which comes last. In my lessons, I take advantage of Prime Time 1 by beginning my lessons with a 15-minute mini lesson where I clearly state the learning objective, and introduce any new material. I then enter into downtime where the students work independently or in partnerships. In math, downtime looks like math centers with games based on prior knowledge. Reading's downtime looks like independent silent reading. Writing's downtime looks like a continuation of their present writing piece. After downtime, I enter into Prime Time 2, where as a class, we reflect on our work over the new information and solidify our understanding. Prior to reading this text, this was oftentimes the part I skipped over, the end of my lessons. The end of my lessons seemed rushed and unimportant to me. Learning about primacy-recency effect has changed the way I approach my lesson planning, and I've already seen positive effects on my students. After keeping in mind the importance of primacy-recency effect, I also learned that keeping the number of items in a lesson objective within the age-appropriate capacity limit increases the likelihood that students will remember more of what they learned. Learning about their working memory came at the perfect time for me to apply this in my classroom. We had begun a geometry unit and we were learning about how to classify shapes. I used to have this big anchor chart that showed each shape's specifications. Knowing that elementary students can only retain 3 to 4 new pieces of information at a time changed my approach. I broke down teaching quadrilaterals, polygons, and their attributes into multiple days as to not confuse the students with too much information at one time, and instead focused on 2 or 3 shapes at a time. I saw a huge difference in the way my students retained this information. While focusing on the students' working memory and how it is important to teach no more than 3 to 4 items at a time, I also learned the value of finding meaning, or the why, behind the content being taught. Without meaning, students memorize the procedures without understanding how and why they work. They end up confused about when to use which procedure. Providing meaning to the content being taught allows for long-term memory storage. This year, my team used a new math unit developed by Kathy Fosno to teach multiplication concepts. These math units allowed the students to use creativity and explore the concepts being taught by using real-life scenarios. The students are given the freedom to try their own multiplication strategies while understanding how this skill will be used on an everyday basis. By building our multiplication unit upon understanding versus memorization like we have in the past, I witnessed my students having a much better understanding of multiplication than ever before. Another great lesson I learned through this course is how important creativity is to reach a higher level of thinking. In the text, it says that we should ensure that all grade level and subject area teachers use instructional strategies that support rather than dampen students' creativity. The arts are a critical part of learning that seems to be overlooked. This class gave me a different perspective on the arts and how it should be incorporating them into my classroom. Paper slides like this final project is one way that I have students use creativity in the arts in my classroom to show understanding of the content in any way they want. For some, it may be drawing, others may create a poem, some may create a song about what they know, but they all show what they have learned in a way that is best for them. It is also important to keep in mind our end goal when planning a lesson. We need to be asking ourselves, do we want to challenge the level of effort they're putting into a concept, or do I want to further their thinking process and include more complex questions for them? It is important for us to recognize the difference between complexity and difficulty to be able to maximize the attainability of our learning objectives. Being able to understand the differences should allow us to begin lesson planning with our end goal in mind. We should be looking at our lessons and first identifying whether the lesson is targeting difficulty or complexity. Difficulty will be more often used on a new skill or the basic recall of information. Complexity will more often be used to challenge the student's thought process and increase their depth of knowledge about a learned topic. Knowing the difference will require different questions and prompts to be asked, and knowing the right timing of a student's ability to move up the Bloom's taxonomy. The final big takeaway I had from this course that I have already started applying in my classroom was making sure not to teach two concepts at the same time that have more similarities than differences. It is best to teach them a few weeks apart to assure that there is less confusion between the two concepts when being retrieved from memory, or teach the differences first. Teachers can help learners process new learnings accurately by having them identify the unique characteristics that make one concept different from all others. I immediately applied this to my teaching of perimeter and area. These are often concepts that students get confused about because they are similar in the way that they are measuring an aspect of an object's shape. Due to their similarities, I chose to teach the topics separately. I taught the critical attributes of perimeter first. Once the students had mastered perimeter and had a firm understanding of how and why it is used, I introduced area and covered the critical attributes of area. Teaching these concepts that seemingly go together separately helped my students store them differently in their memory. There was much less confusion when I taught them separately than when I have taught them side by side in the past. I look forward to using the knowledge I have gained about how brains learn best in everyday lesson planning. I'm excited to take the concepts I have learned back to my coworkers and make some much needed changes to our old habits. The course Brain-Based Teaching and Learning has been enlightening and refreshing.